Hey guys, happy Monday. Hope all is well. I'm bringing you another game of the day video, the third one in a row, in fact. So I'm happy that I'm keeping this video thing going, even during the beginning of the work week. In this in this video, I'm going to show a game from a tournament that's going on in Serbia called the Orbis GM event. There's like a GM and an IM section. I think it's like a round robin event. And the game I'm going to show is between Suat Atalik and Junta Ikeda. Suat is actually been a pretty well-known GM in the world for, I want to say, 20, 30 years. I think he's in his early 50s now. And while he's definitely not at his peak anymore, he definitely plays enterprising chess. And Junta Ikeda, I'd never heard of before, but he's a 27-year-old guy from well, I don't know where he's from, but he's 27, and I think he was born in 91 or 92. So, yeah, let's get right into it. So, D4, F5, that really struck me right away. The Dutch defense is definitely not a popular line to play against D4. Jan Gustafsson, one of my favorite commentators out there, just despises the advance of the F-pawn. I mean, you're pretty much opening the weakest diagonal to your king in two different directions. So it's a very controversial opening, but playable. The real question after d4 f5 is figuring out what Dutch is it going to be. Because there's the Leningrad Dutch, which involves a setup with knight f6, pawn g6, bishop g7. Or there's the Stonewall, which is a knight f6, e6, d5 setup. And then there's even the classical Dutches, which go knight f6, e6, and then d6. And the idea with playing d6 instead of d5 is to keep an eye on the e5 square a little bit. I've actually dabbled with all the setups, but really just in blitz because I think it's such a committal move to play f5 that I just doesn't suit my style. Anyways, let's see what Suat did. So c4, knight f6, knight c3, very reasonable move. And then black played a very interesting move, d6. And d6 is a interesting but fairly controversial move because it's not the normal move order for the Leningrad Dutch that I was alluding to before, where you play g6 and bishop g7, and then you castle, and then maybe you consider d6. D6 right away, it's like, what's the point of playing it really early? Particularly when you're weakening these squares around your king, but really the e6 square before you've really castled. I don't know if it matters too much. I think maybe the idea is to reinforce the knight on f6 with the knight on d7 as quickly as possible, but it's just definitely a controversial move. I would have gone g6 myself. Anyways, bishop g5, knight bd7, and you can see why bishop g5, knight bd7 is almost necessary here, because if g6 was played here, you just have bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and this pawn structure is really, really ugly. And a lot of times white has this plan to play h4, h5, undermining the g6 square. And if black was ever to push this pawn to g5, then this whole diagonal would be weak. So yeah, just think about weak squares always, particularly with pawns. It's just a constant theme, a constant source of attention. It deserves your attention. And that's the thing about the Dutch is that these really committal pawn moves really mean that there are potential weaknesses. So anyways, bishop g5, knight bd7, queen c2. You can see right away eyeing that diagonal on f5. It's where you develop the queen with tempo, but this is what's happening here. G6, defending that pawn. And I think white is just clearly better here. White's a little bit further in development. White could even consider castling here right away. White can consider, a move like e3. White might even try going, full-throated for the center in some crazy way. White could even try h4, h5 sometimes. I didn't love white's move here. If I was white, I would have castled the queen side. I think that makes the most sense. But white was designed to play really elaborate and play knight h3. And knight h3 is an interesting move because the idea is to shift the knight towards the middle. Not that way. This way towards the middle, eyeing that e6 square and transferring the knight to f4. And the point is, well, maybe if I put my knight on h3 instead of f3, not only do I get the f4 square, but I also allow for pawn f3 at some point myself. It's a move that I've seen a lot in the Nimzo Indian, actually, where a queen c2 Nimzo, to be specific. This whole setup over here looks very much like a queen c2 Nimzo Indian. And then white sometimes will play f3 and knight h3, knight f2, and put the knight there to reinforce an eventual e4 push. I know that's a lot of arrows, but I was just trying to illustrate, what actually may be going on. That being said, the reason I don't like it, knight h3, is because it's a little bit slow, and it allows black, who really did get away with some extravagance here on the king side, to sort of take more space in the middle. And that's what black did by playing e5, a really good move. Because now after e5, black is not only striking in the center at this d4 pawn, but also taking away the f4 square from this knight. And if the knight doesn't have the f4 square, f3, knight f2 might be a little bit slow. And I actually think it is slow. So I don't love this knight h3 move. But e5 was played, castles queenside. You can make the argument that that move should have been played a move earlier. Again, if we go back to this position, instead of knight h3, we went castles right away. And then black played e5. Well, there's a few options. I mean, one of them is just actually to play d takes, white play. And after a move like knight takes, knight d5 might be just very annoying. In any case, just the fact that the rook is lined up against the queen just seems pretty nice to me. So I would have castled right away. But that didn't happen. e5, castles now. And really, the other thing that's really annoying about the rook here with the bishop here is that this queen really can't get out of these indirect pins. Like the pawn might be pinned one day to the queen, and this knight is also pinned because the bishop's on the line. So the e5 break has its merits and its downsides essentially. And the normal developing diagonal for this Leningrad setup with this Dutch would be the bishop to go to g7, but because of the pressure on this pin on this diagonal, bishop e7 was played here, and that's a little unfortunate because it's the wrong diagonal. Another thing is it allows white this very nice positive pawn tension where white can decide to take this when they feel like and open up the line for the rook. And it's because of that bishop e7 probably wasn't the best move. Instead, I would have actually played what am I saying? I would have played e takes d4. And the point is that after e takes d4, rook takes d4, it looks like this rook has gotten to this really amazing post. The thing is that it's not really well reinforced here. And frankly, now the bishop can come to g7 and eventually get a tempo on the diagonal. So after rook takes d4, bishop g7, black could probably castle and move the queen out the way really quickly and get a viable position, particularly because, again, this bishop would be on the right diagonal. And this knight on h3 looks a little bit misplaced with the center open. But bishop e7 does not actually do much to challenge the middle, and white decided to seize the chance and played a really brilliant move. This is a really strong grandmaster type move, c5. And the reason c5 is brilliant is because white is more ready in the middle to take on the center than black is. Again, this queen is sort of shut in the box right now. And frankly, the opening of the middle with the rook lined up against the queen is really trouble, particularly when black hasn't finished castling and finished development. So, yeah, I mean, in many positions, you'll find that the side that's closer to connecting rooks is actually the side that is usually better off. And you can see here that white's actually only 2 moves from connecting the rooks, whereas black needs to castle, move the queen out the way, move the bishop out the way, get some other space, and it's just a lot to do. Whereas white can just go e3, bishop c4, and then the rooks are connected. And they're real tactical threats here because if d takes e5, which might seem natural, there's d takes e5, and all of a sudden white is just winning, I think, because this pin is going to be really strong, and the knight doesn't even have a good square to go to. A move like knight h5 might just be answered by bishop h6, preventing castling and threatening e6 next move. So really, really difficult position to be in. Now, okay, d takes e5 wasn't the best move. The other issue is that if e takes d4, rook takes d4 would just allow knight takes c5, and then all black would be okay. But after e takes d4, white can throw in the intermediate move, c takes d6, which hits this bishop. And it turns out that this bishop on e7 is probably way more important. Well, not probably, it is more important than the knight on c3. So I could entertain a scenario where it's like d takes c3, maybe d takes e7, c takes b2 check. I don't know if king b1 or queen takes b2 is better. I'm not sure which move is better. But I don't know. I think white would be better in both scenarios. Like queen takes b2, queen takes e7. Okay, maybe this is actually not as clear as I thought. I'm trying to figure out what the right way to do it would be. Okay, e takes d4. I think the move must be c takes d6, unless there's a knight d5 idea here. Knight d5, the knight just hang. Yeah, it must be c takes d6, dc3, and there must be something here that's annoying, but I'm pretty sure it must be d7, frankly. cb2, and maybe king b1 is the move. I'm not sure, but essentially white is going to have the two bishops and is again closer to connecting the rooks than black is. And that probably should be a problem. For instance, maybe queen takes e7, maybe e4 is actually the move. I don't know. I'm fishing here, but maybe that's a move, because if queen takes e4, there's bishop d3, and then rook he1 check. And if f takes e4, maybe there's bishop c4 just stopping black from castling, and then this rook transfers over. And very, very dangerous initiative for black to face. Again, I'm not completely sure, but I think that is the point. And I'm sure Suat was looking a little bit deeper than I am just off the cuff right now. So anyways, c5, it was enough to scare away the black player. So black played e4, just trying to relinquish the pawn tension. But, this doesn't solve all the problems. There's still a tension here that exists. And now, because again, it's positive pawn tension here, because white really doesn't mind this rook opening up against the queen, white decides to continue the undermining by playing f3. Excellent move. And yeah, I mean, it really just playing into white's hands here, because we talked about knight h3 in combination with f3 being ideas, and now white is able to do that and do it with tempo because the e4 pawn is hanging. So there's really not a great way to respond here, because if e takes f3, there's so many options, but you could play g takes f3 and open the middle with e4 and take in more space in the center. You can even play e takes f3 and just play bishop c4 check next. But I actually think black would have played, if e takes f3, I think white would have played g takes f3 and then just had the half-open g file with rook g1, knight comes to f4, h4, h5. Just that e4 is an option. The bishop might come to c4. And again, I know all these arrows are overwhelming, but it just seems like all the saints are marching in. So, in lieu of that reality, after f3, black just castled. And castling seemed to be a curious move to me because the e4 pawn is hanging. You might consider like f takes e4, d takes e4, knight takes e4, but it doesn't quite work tactically because the bishop on g5 is hanging. And moreover, you can continue to undermine a little bit more before you actually go in for the e4 pawn. So again, like white could have played something like bishop takes f6, but that would have been a real mistake because you would have helped black develop and sort of get the fluidity of the pieces back. So because a move like this, like bishop takes, knight takes, f takes, d takes, knight takes, winning this pawn would be a really, really bad decision because all of a sudden black's bishops would come alive and bishop f5 would be a move, and then there'd be pins, and black would have the two bishops, and now all of a sudden it's black that's more developed than white and closer to connecting the rooks. So sometimes, you don't want to be greedy and just take the first pawn that comes your way. And white knew better to do that because, again, it helps activate all of black's pieces. So after castles, white decided to play it a little bit better than that and played bishop h6. And I really like that move because you get the bishop, you step the bishop away from this diagonal where they're, not that diagonal, this diagonal, where they may have been potential discovery threats with like knight takes e4 or knight somewhere. And additionally, you're just threatening to win an exchange. So it's a move you just make with tempo. There's still this pressure on e4. And the last thing that's really valuable about it is you clearing the g line. So maybe white still might go rook g1, pawn g4. Those are things to think about. So because the e4 pawn is still hanging and this rook and f8 is hanging, black thought, okay, which is more valuable, this rook and f8 or preserving my pawn structure? And black played d5. And it's a very interesting move because black's basically saying, my pawn structure right now is more critical than the exchange that I can lose. And I actually don't disagree with it. I think black needed to try to hold up the pawn structure because if this position in the center collapses, then the king side will go as well. And the center is really the real critical area right now. This zone of the board is really, really critical, the 4th and 5th ranks. And I like that white also acknowledged the importance of this and decided, you know what, I don't need to be greedy here. I don't need to take this exchange. And instead, I'm going to try and attack the zone. And white played knight f4, really nice move, which has the dual threat of knight e6, still attacking the queen, threatening another type of exchange on a8, and hitting the d5 pawn. So just a nice finesse not to rush trying to win the exchange. And it's also really hard to meet because, again, this e6 square that we talked about much earlier in the game is super loose. But how can you defend the square? Not very easy. And defend d5 at the same time. Turns out there's only one solution, and it's an ugly one. And it's the move knight b8, which just looks on the face of it like it's just a cringeworthy move to make because you're undeveloping a piece and you're already behind in development. So really tough move to make. And I know we did see in the game yesterday that undeveloping a piece did actually work out for the black player. But the difference in that game was that the center was actually closed. This center, there's a real obvious pawn tension that white can continue to observe and try to undermine. And so moving pieces backward in a position that's open is like not going to work out. But I guess black reasoned it was the lesser evil than any other alternative. So anyways, knight b8, and white decides, you know what, I still don't need this exchange because my bishop is actually pretty good here. It's on a nice attacking post. And this rook on f8 isn't really doing anything. So I'm just going to leave it there and continue with my attack with h4. And that was a really excellent decision because now white is trying to open more lines. Excuse me. So c6 was played, just trying to defend this pawn. And now h5. And look at how quickly the floodgates have opened. This rook is going to come out. This bishop is eyeing here. This knight is eyeing here. It's just a really tough position. And, yeah, it's just there's not really a great way to deal with it. Black decided to play g5, trying to give up a pawn to slow down the initiative. But if you have to make moves like that already, it's a sign of desperation. White happily took the pawn. Bishop takes g5. And black decided, okay, now it's time to try and take some initiative. So e6 was played, trying to getting something going on the king side, on the queen side, before the king side just totally collapses. But with pieces on the back rank like this, it's hard to imagine that any race is going to be won by black. So white continued, g4. Now it's a race, but white is just way ahead of that race. So just wants to continue running and opening lines by any means necessary. Note that if f takes g4 was played, f takes e4 would be played, and white would totally bust open the center. So that was just sort of out of the question. I'll show it just an example, like f takes, pawn takes here, knight takes, let's say knight takes, and just e3. And now bishop c4 check is coming, queen takes e4 is a potential move, rook g1 might come. Okay, I know the bishop on g5 is hanging, and that's my bad. But the position is just not tenable. So yeah, I mean, I could have taken on e7 and then played e3, and the evaluation doesn't change after in this scenario like this. So, anyways, g4. I decide to ignore it and try to get something going on the queen side. Played b takes c5, and white played d takes c5, which is interesting because now it's like, oh, maybe black has some control of the center and can start to do some stuff. Well, the answer is no. The queen is there. You can't just do anything. You can't just do stuff with your pawns, and with all these pieces on the back rank, it's hard to imagine anything happening here. So f takes g4 is played. Bishop h6 now is played. Again, we talked about this bishop, being on this post potentially, having some prospects there. It makes sense. This bishop almost serves like a thorn pawn. That's why I like to call a pawn that gets to h6, because it means that once a heavy gets there, particularly a queen, checkmate is usually imminent. So to have a bishop on this square, a pawn on this square, right near the king is always a real nuisance. And after the other thing about bishop h6, it opens up the line for the rook. So, disaster. Bishop takes c5 was played, trying to win a pawn here. And I guess black missed the follow-up because now knight takes d5 was played. And this bishop on c5 is wide open for attack. So it's just not good. The position is totally falling apart. So c takes d5 happened, queen takes d5. And you might say, oh, the material is actually equal. There's 5 pawns each, and the position might be equal. So, but it could not be farther from the truth. Essentially here, not only does white have the 2 bishops, but white also has a safer king. White is still threatening to win the exchange on f8. White has all these trumps. So it's really just a winning position for white. Rook f7 was played. I guess black had the same idea. Oh, the material's equal. Let me try to get something going. And, well, rook f7 does have the threat of rook c7, which would, I think the word is skewer the queen and the king against each other. And white couldn't allow that. But white decided to play really energetically still. I mean, a move like king b1 might be the first thing that, like, the amateur, that comes to the mind of the amateur player. But, and it's the first move that comes to mind to me without looking at the tactics. But an even better move, looking at tactics, is knight takes d5. And the point is that now the c7 square is covered, and I'm still threatening knight takes f6, and my rook is coming in the game, and I've just won a pawn, a very important pawn that basically was the chain behind white's last remnants in the center. So knight takes d5 was tough to deal with. Knight a6 was played. And now queen d4, just tucking the queen back. No need to rush trading the knight, just tucking the queen back makes sense. And now bishop f5 was played. And now it seemed this was a little impressive sequence. I mean, just a little bit. Like it seems like maybe knight a6. Well, it seems like rook f7, knight a6, bishop f5. All of a sudden, black's pieces are coordinated, and rook c8 might be coming, and pawn e3. But frankly, it's too little, too late, because white's already won a pawn and can even consider trading. But again, this king on g8 still isn't safe. So I really like this move, knight c3, that Suat did, because really what he's saying is, look, sure, rook c8 check was a threat, but I can even trade queens here, and I have the bishop pair. And I thought that was a really funny and interesting decision. Note that a move like rook d7 here, if it was played, doesn't quite work because white can just sidestep with queen c4 check and actually pick off the knight after trading the rooks. So, yeah, nothing really works. So after knight c3, black didn't want to trade queens and instead play queen a5, just trying to drum something up. But again, even if black could move again in this position, there's no immediate threat. Black has no move here that actually wins anything. And that's not a good sign, a position that's so sharp. So white continued. F takes g4, attacking the bishop, winning a second pawn, and taking the pawn on g4 was almost a death wish because again rook g1 would come and this pin would just be really nasty. Also, even bishop h3 is a possibility, just developing the last piece and then transferring this rook over. So bishop takes g4 is pretty much out of the question. So bishop e6 was played. And then white just continued g5, trying to open those lines before anything happened to the king on c1. And you can't really ignore this knight being attacked, because if g takes f6, not only do you lose the knight, but again, the rook comes to g1 with devastating effect. So knight g4 is played, and for white to get these moves with tempo is even more critical. The fact that white is getting tempo, for those out there that may not know it, is when you get moves like, and you gain time. They're like forcing moves almost. Not tempo is not always forcing moves, but that's the way I like to think about it. And basically, as a consequence of getting these moves with tempo, white is getting more time to continue to the attack and develop, whereas black is not getting the time to develop their own initiative against the white king. So that's sort of the problem and the theme here. So after knight g4, now white gets another move and plays bishop h3. And now I know he said whoever connects the rooks first wins, and you might argue that black's rooks are almost connected, but white was the one that connected the rooks, and white is the one that has the attack here. So really not a good sign. Anyways, rook c8 was played, trying to get something going here. I mean, if it was black's move, if it was black's moves, like again in this position, black could play queen takes a2 and maybe queen a1 check, and maybe start to get something going. But unfortunately, it's white to move. And white just played bishop takes g4. And yeah, unfortunately, if like a move like queen takes a2 now, white could just go bishop takes e6, and you just have one spite check on a1, and then the king goes to c2, and that's the end of the story. So yeah, so bishop takes g4, bishop takes g4 is played. And now, again, these rooks connected. We talked about this, right? Now, white's up 2 pawns. This queen and bishop are eyeing the square. It's just time to trade or finish the game. And white tried to finish the game with rook hf1. Simple and strong. Try to trade this rook and then deliver checkmate. And black doesn't have a lot of good choices here, and played rook d7, trying to just keep the rook on the file and you know, entertain defending a little bit longer. And again, we talked about this bishop being like a thorn pawn, like just a pain on this diagonal, and allowed a really pretty finish, really nice coup de grace with this move, queen c4 check. And wow, isn't that devastating? Because after queen c4 check, you're hitting this rook, and if the king moves away, there's queen takes, just winning the rook, and if rook takes, there's rook f8 checkmate. What a nice finish to the game, giving away a queen in an open position to deliver mate. The black player did not allow this and resigned after queen c4, basically leading itself to the photo finish. So, anyways, that was the game today. I thought it was really interesting. I thought, you know, we don't see it Dutch at the highest levels. I mean, this was 2,500 versus 2,400, but we really don't see the Dutch at the highest levels, Leningrad or Stonewall, and this game is somewhat indicative of that reasoning. I mean, now you might see it once in a while here or there, but it's usually a surprise weapon, and it's because the Dutch is really risky. You're opening a line to your king very early. It's a very committal pawn structure, and if there's anything I know about super GMs, they really don't like to play committal structures. Flexibility is really valued at the highest levels, because when you're flexible, you're more unassuming and can adjust to the tenor of the play. So yeah, those themes really bore itself out in this game. And then, you know, in the early opening, we really saw a battle of pawn tension, and we saw that white had all this positive pawn tension that allowed white to sort of unlock the position in the center and on the king side with his pawns. So, yeah, definitely keep those themes in mind. And, you know, it's never a good day at the office if someone is moving their pieces backward in a position that's an open position. So, tough game for black. I'm sure it was a fun game to play for white. and it was a fun game to go over. So hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good one. Thanks for watching.